My neighbor built a 10-foot concrete wall right on my property and laughed, saying, "No more view for you." I calmly smiled and said, "No problem." 3 months later, when he saw the city demolition order, his face turned pale white. My name is David Mitchell, 41 years old, and I'm a civil engineer specializing in land surveying. I've lived in my house in Millbrook Heights for 8 years, a quiet suburban neighborhood where most people respect boundaries. I bought my property specifically for its location on a small hill with a beautiful view of the valley below. The house sits on a corner lot with more space than most neighbors. That view was one of the main selling points. After long hours reviewing blueprints, I'd take breaks to look out at the rolling hills and small lake. The problem started when Harold Brennan moved in next door. Harold was a recently retired construction foreman who had strong opinions about how properties should be maintained. Have you ever had a neighbor who seemed to think they knew better than everyone else? Things started small. Harold would comment about my lawn needing more mowing or suggest that my mailbox was slightly off-center. I ignored these remarks, figuring he was trying to be helpful. His behavior escalated over the summer. He started parking his truck blocking part of my driveway, claiming it was technically on the street. When I politely asked him to move it, he'd make a big show of measuring distances. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in September. I was having coffee when I heard heavy machinery outside. Through my window, I saw Harold directing a crew building what appeared to be a retaining wall. Initially, I assumed he was building along our shared property line. But as I watched, I realized the wall was being constructed several feet onto my property. I grabbed my surveying equipment and went outside. "Morning, Harold," I called out. "Quite a project you've got going here." He turned with a smug grin. "Yeah, decided this hillside needed proper retaining work. Don't want erosion problems." I politely pointed out that the wall appeared to be on my property, offering to show him the survey markers. Harold laughed dismissively. "Those little stakes don't mean anything. I've been in construction for 30 years. I know where property lines really are." He gestured toward the wall, already 4 feet high. "Besides, this wall benefits both properties." "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I need you to check the official survey before continuing. This is definitely on my land." His expression hardened. "Listen, college boy, I don't need some desk jockey telling me about construction. This wall is going up whether you like it or not." By day's end, Harold had built a solid concrete wall that was 10 feet high and 50 feet long, running directly across my property. The wall completely blocked my view of the valley, the main reason I had chosen this house. That evening, Harold came outside to admire his work. "How do you like it?" he called over, clearly pleased. "No more view for you, but at least the property looks more structured now." I walked over to the fence line. "Harold, I need you to understand that this wall is entirely on my property. I'm going to need you to remove it." He laughed out loud. "Remove it? Do you have any idea how much concrete and labor went into this? That wall isn't going anywhere. If you don't like it, call a lawyer." I smiled calmly and said, "No problem, Harold. Thanks for letting me know where you stand." What Harold didn't know was that his comments had just given me exactly what I needed. Have you ever dealt with someone so confident in their wrongness that they made your job easier? That night, I sat in my office, now staring at concrete instead of a beautiful valley, and began planning my response. As a civil engineer, I knew exactly how to handle property disputes. First, I pulled out all my property documents, the original survey, the deed, county records, and aerial photographs. Everything confirmed that Harold's wall was entirely on my property. Next, I researched local building codes. In our municipality, any structure over 6 feet high requires a building permit, environmental impact assessment, and neighbor notification. Harold's 10-foot wall met none of these requirements. My professional knowledge became crucial. Any concrete structure this close to a hillside required soil stability analysis and proper drainage. Harold's wall had neither. By blocking natural water flow, his wall would likely cause flooding during heavy rains. I spent the weekend photographing everything, measuring distances, and documenting the wall's location relative to official survey markers. I also researched Harold's background and discovered he had been cited twice for building code violations. Monday morning, I made strategic phone calls. First, I contacted the city planning department requesting a formal inspection. Second, I called my homeowner's insurance company. Third, I reached out to a property law attorney. The city planning office was very interested. A 10-foot retaining wall without permits? That's a serious violation. We'll have someone out there by Wednesday. The insurance company was equally concerned. Any structure built on your property without permission is trespassing, my agent explained. but I decided to take a measured approach. Instead of immediately demanding removal, I would let proper authorities handle it through official channels. Have you found that sometimes the best revenge is letting people face natural consequences? Wednesday morning, I saw a city inspector's truck pull up outside Harold's house. Through my window, I watched as the inspector measured Harold's wall and took extensive photographs. 20 minutes later, I heard angry shouting from next door. Harold was arguing with the inspector, insisting the wall was perfectly legal. Harold's responses told me everything. "What do you mean it's not on my property?" And "That's impossible. I've been in construction for 30 years. Thursday morning, Harold received an official notice from the city. I was checking my mail when the delivery truck arrived. He opened the envelope, read for 30 seconds, then his face went completely pale. The notice cited Harold for multiple violations: building without permits, construction on property he didn't own, environmental violations, and creating a safety hazard. He had 30 days to remove the wall or face daily fines of $500. That afternoon, Harold knocked on my door. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by obvious panic. "David, we need to talk," he said desperately. "There's been some misunderstanding with the city." "What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked. "They're saying my wall is on your property, but that can't be right. I measured everything carefully." I invited him inside and showed him my official survey documents and photographs, showing his wall's position relative to boundary markers. "Harold," I said gently, "the wall is about 15 feet onto my property. It's not even close to the property line." His face went even paler. "But I was so sure. I used landmarks and eyeball distances." "I know you meant well," I said, "but professional surveying requires precise instruments, not estimates." "What am I going to do?" he asked, slumping into a chair. "The city says I have to remove the entire wall. Do you know how much that's going to cost?" I did know. Demolishing 50 feet of 10-foot-high concrete wall would cost approximately $15,000 to $20,000. "Harold, I'm willing to work with you," I said. "If you can get the wall removed within the city's timeline and restore my property properly, I won't pursue additional compensation." "You're not going to sue me?" he asked, surprised. "I don't want to sue anyone," I replied honestly. "I just want my property back the way it was." Over the next 2 weeks, Harold hired a demolition crew. The process was expensive, messy, and time-consuming. Every day I watched workers with jackhammers slowly break apart the concrete structure Harold had been so proud of. During demolition, Harold came over to apologize. "I should have listened to you from the beginning," he admitted. "I was so confident that I didn't think I needed to check official boundaries." "We all make mistakes," I said. "The important thing is learning from them." The whole ordeal cost Harold approximately $18,000, $3,000 to build the wall, $15,000 to demolish it, and $2,000 to restore my property. Would you have been as patient with a neighbor who showed such disrespect for your property rights? 6 months later, Harold and I have developed a surprisingly good relationship. He learned to respect boundaries, and I learned that sometimes people's arrogance comes from insecurity rather than malice. Harold now asks permission before making any changes that might affect neighboring properties. Last month, he even helped me install a new deck, carefully ensuring every post was within my property lines. The experience taught me that the most effective response to unreasonable behavior isn't always confrontation. Sometimes the best approach is to remain calm, document everything, and let proper authorities handle the situation. My engineering background didn't just help me win a property dispute. It helped me handle the situation while preserving neighborhood relationships. When friends ask about the incident, I tell them the sweetest victory was getting my view back while maintaining respect for my neighbor. Harold learned an expensive lesson about following proper procedures. Sometimes the best revenge is simply allowing someone to experience natural consequences of their poor decisions. Harold built himself into a corner, literally and figuratively. All I had to do was wait for reality to catch up with his overconfidence. What's the most important lesson you've learned about dealing with difficult neighbors? What I didn't anticipate was how quickly word would spread through our neighborhood about Harold's expensive mistake. Within a week of the demolition, I started receiving visits from other neighbors who had their own stories about Harold's helpful suggestions. Mrs. Chen from across the street knocked on my door Tuesday evening. "I heard about Harold's wall," she said hesitantly. "I was wondering if you could look at something for me." She led me to her backyard, where Harold had recently installed what he called a drainage improvement along their shared fence line. The concrete channel he'd built was directing water runoff directly toward her house's foundation. "He said it would help both our properties," Mrs. Chen explained. "But ever since he put it in, my basement has been flooding every time it rains. I examined Harold's handiwork and immediately saw the problem. Not only had he built the drainage channel without permits, but he'd violated several city codes. The channel was causing erosion that could undermine Mrs. Chen's foundation. This is a serious issue, I told her. You should contact the city's drainage department immediately. 2 days later, Harold received his second citation in as many months. This time, the fines were even steeper because the improper drainage posed a threat to a neighboring structure. Have you ever noticed how one person's pattern of behavior tends to catch up with them all at once? As word spread about Harold's troubles, more neighbors began coming forward. The Johnsons revealed that Harold had trimmed their oak tree without permission, cutting branches that extended over his driveway. The tree was now dying because he'd removed too much of the canopy. The Garcias discovered that Harold had been dumping his grass clippings in a wooded area that was actually part of their property. The Millers had issues with Harold's bright security light that shone directly into their bedroom window. I realized that Harold's behavior with me wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern of someone who believed his experience gave him the right to make decisions about other people's property. Mrs. Chen asked if I would attend a neighborhood meeting to discuss the Harold situation. Several neighbors wanted advice on dealing with their own issues. I don't want to cause trouble, I told her. Harold and I have actually worked things out. That's exactly why we need your help, she replied. You found a way to handle this that didn't destroy the neighborhood dynamics. Would you get involved in helping neighbors deal with someone who had already caused you problems? The following Saturday evening, 12 neighbors gathered in the Chen's living room. Harold's improvements had affected nearly every property within a 3-block radius. The thing is, said John Garcia, Harold seems to mean well. He genuinely believes he's helping, but he never asked permission, and when we object, he dismisses our concerns. I shared my experience with the wall situation, emphasizing how I'd focused on official channels rather than personal confrontation. The key was documenting everything and letting the proper authorities handle it. But we don't all have engineering backgrounds, Mrs. Chen pointed out. You don't need to, I explained. The city has departments specifically designed to handle these issues. They have the expertise and authority. I offered to help them document their issues and connect them with appropriate city departments. Within 2 weeks, Harold had received citations for illegal tree trimming, improper waste disposal, and light pollution violations. The fines were adding up quickly, but more importantly, Harold was beginning to understand that his approach was causing serious problems. 3 weeks after the neighborhood meeting, Harold showed up at my door looking exhausted and defeated. David, I need to ask you something, he said, sitting heavily in my chair. How did everything go so wrong so fast? What do you mean? I've gotten 4 more citations from the city. The Chens are threatening to sue me. The Johnsons want me to pay for a tree specialist. I was just trying to help everyone. Harold, I said gently, in all these projects you've done around the neighborhood, how many times did you ask the property owners for permission before starting? He was quiet for a long moment. I figured if it was an improvement, they'd be grateful. I mean, I have 30 years of experience. But did you check local building codes, get permits, verify property lines? His face reddened. I've been doing construction longer than most of these city inspectors have been alive. I didn't think I needed to follow every little bureaucratic rule. Harold, your experience is valuable, but every municipality has specific requirements. What works in commercial construction doesn't always apply to residential properties. So, what am I supposed to do now? He asked. I've got thousands of dollars in fines, angry neighbors, and a reputation as the neighborhood troublemaker. You fix what you can fix, pay the fines, and learn from the experience, I said, and maybe next time, ask before you help. He nodded slowly. Would you be willing to help me figure out how to make things right with everyone? It was the first time Harold had ever asked for help, rather than insisting he knew what to do. Have you found that sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they're willing to change? Over the next month, Harold and I worked together to address the various issues he'd created. It was an expensive education for him, but he approached it with a humility I'd never seen before. For Mrs. Chen's drainage problem, Harold hired a proper contractor to remove his makeshift channel and install a professionally designed system. The cost was $8,000, but it prevented potentially catastrophic foundation damage. The Johnson's oak tree couldn't be saved, but Harold paid for its removal and the planting of 2 new trees, selected by a certified arborist, another $6,000. For the Garcias, Harold organized a neighborhood cleanup day, properly disposing of all the yard waste and paying for soil restoration. The Millers' light pollution issue was the easiest to fix. Harold simply redirected the security light and added a shade. Each resolution required Harold to work with city departments to ensure compliance. He had to get permits retroactively for some projects and completely redo work that didn't meet standards. I had no idea how much I didn't know, he admitted one afternoon. I was so confident in my experience that I never considered I might be wrong. By the end of 2 months, Harold had spent nearly $25,000 fixing the various problems he'd created. But something interesting happened. He began to earn genuine respect from the neighbors he'd previously annoyed. 6 months after the wall incident, Harold had transformed from the neighborhood's biggest problem into one of its most valuable resources. The key difference was that he now asked permission before offering help and always checked with proper authorities. When the Patels, a young couple new to the neighborhood, mentioned wanting to build a deck, Harold offered to review their contractor's plans for free. He caught several code violations that would have caused problems later, and suggested modifications that saved them money. Mrs. Chen's foundation, now properly protected by Harold's professionally installed drainage system, stayed completely dry through the heaviest rainstorm in 5 years. I was a bull in a china shop, he told me one evening, as we worked together on my deck project. I had all this knowledge and experience, but I was applying it without wisdom. What's the difference? I asked. Wisdom means knowing when and how to apply your knowledge. It means understanding that being right about construction techniques doesn't make you right about everything, and it definitely means asking permission before making changes to other people's property. The most surprising development was that Harold and I had become genuine friends. Our different approaches, his intuitive, hands-on experience, and my systematic engineering-based knowledge complemented each other well. Have you found that sometimes your biggest conflicts can lead to your most meaningful relationships? A year after the wall incident, Harold had established himself as the neighborhood's unofficial construction consultant. But now, instead of imposing his ideas on others, he waited to be asked for help and always recommended proper procedures. When the city proposed a new sidewalk that would require removing several mature trees, Harold organized the neighbors to present alternative routing suggestions at a city council meeting. His presentation convinced the council to modify their plan. Last month, Harold was elected to the Neighborhood Association Board. His platform was simple: experience with humility, expertise with permission. As I write this, I'm looking out my restored window at the beautiful valley view I thought I'd lost forever. Harold's wall is gone, but something better has taken its place. A genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared learning. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can gain from a conflict isn't victory over your opponent, but understanding of how to turn an adversary into an ally. Harold's expensive lesson cost him money, but it gave him something more valuable: the wisdom to use his expertise in ways that actually serve his community. The sweetest revenge isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about helping someone become the person they have the potential to be. What's the most important relationship that started with conflict but grew into friendship?